Hi, I'm Chris Hess, Manager of Engineering at Harrington Hoist. Welcome to another episode of Lessons on Lifting.
Hi, my name is Adam Tansky. I'm an engineer in Harrington's Custom Products Group. Today we're going to be going over how to make a voltage change on an SNER trolley hoist. This particular unit we're going to be taking from 110 to 220 volt single phase power. They're capable on running on 110 or 220 volt single phase power. Before we begin any work, it's important to note that before you enter any electrical device, the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your power to that device is terminated. Safety first. So we've already verified. Again, your first step should be the same. Make sure your power to your hoist is terminated. The next thing you're going to need is the proper wiring diagram. The best resource for obtaining that wiring diagram is our website, harringtonhoists.com. Click on Tech Support, select Standard Wiring Diagrams. From there, you can search for a wiring diagram based on product code, product type, or if you happen to know the number of the diagram ahead of time, you can type in the exact number and pull up that diagram. Another piece of information you're going to need is the lot number off of the trolley of your unit. Right on the label it says lot number. It'll be MP1A or MP1B. Our unit is an MP1B. An MP1A would use diagram 61365. MP1B would use diagram 61484. And if you're dealing with a hoist only with no trolley, you would be using drawing 61364. Another piece of information you're going to need exists on the wiring diagram itself. And you're also going to need to know the product code in order to find that information. The product code is listed on the label of your unit. Once you obtain that product code, there's a chart on your wiring diagram. Locate your product code, and depending on what column it's in, it'll either be a 2-gear unit or a 3-gear unit. Our particular unit is an 010L, and we can find that in the column titled 3 gears. So we know we're working with a 3-gear unit. And once you know that piece of information, the gearing combined with the voltage that you will end up with, you can reference the remaining material on your wiring diagram and do, for example, what I've done in this case, highlight the pieces of information that you need. This identifies the voltage that I'm looking for, and this one, for example, identifies the voltage I'm looking for in conjunction with a 3-gear hoist. And I already determined I have 3 gear. I know the voltage I'm ending up with, so I know I need that particular piece of information. The last thing you need to determine is the access points, where you're going to need to be working on your unit. In our particular situation, and most of them, probably all of them actually, there will be 3 access points that you need to work with on the unit itself. The control box cover for the hoist, the trolley control box cover, and on the reverse side of the beam, the trolley motor connection panel. You're going to need to get in there as well. So the first thing we're going to do is start with our first area. Here we have the hoist control cover. You're going to want to take your Allen key, and you're going to be dealing with the 4 bolts, one on each corner. You're going to loosen them and remove the cover. Now that we've removed the hoist control box cover, we're going to get to work on the areas we need to get to work on. The first thing we're going to do is work with the transformer connections. We're going to take them from 110 to 220, and we can locate the relevant connections by looking in the bottom left corner of this panel here. We're going to be working with points 1, 2, and 3. And this could be deceiving because you might think that the bottom one working up is the way you would start by counting 1, 2, 3, but that's not the case. The bottom terminal point is not terminal point 1. The second point up is terminal point 1, so make sure you pay attention to the labels off to the left of the terminal strip. And we're going to be working with the 4 wires with the tape wrapped around them, denoting them as U, U1, V, and V1. And because they are so similarly labeled, what we would recommend, instead of trying to figure out what may or may not have to be moved between the 2 configurations, just simply remove all 4 of them and build your configuration from the ground up to avoid confusion. So what I'm going to do now is just compare the configuration of the wires on my wiring diagram with the way it exists inside the hoist and make the necessary changes. So I'll start by removing the 4 wires in question. We've now reconnected our wires. The next thing you want to do is reference those very same wires while having your wiring diagram nearby and simply check your work. Start from the bottom, work up, just do it methodically. Take a look at each label on each wire, compare it to where it should be on the wiring diagram, and make sure that your work is accurate. Once you've done that, you're ready to move on to the next area. And we're going to do just that. We're going to be moving on to the hoist motor connections, and we're going to be dealing with terminal points 4 through 8. So again, reference the labels off to the left of the wires just to be sure that you're working in the right areas. And again, the wires in question will be the gray ones with the labels on them. And I'll say again that we recommend, just because of how similarly labeled they are, you're going to want to remove basically all of them instead of having to figure out which ones may or may not have to be moved to avoid confusion and error. The ones labeled U, U1, U2, V1, V2, X, Y, simply take them off because of how similar they look, and then reattach them according to the schematic. Another thing that you want to pay attention to is, well, in my particular situation, I'm going to be removing a jumper from point 4 on this contact block and reattaching it to a point on this terminal strip. When the wiring diagram references a jumper, it's not necessary to reinstall or install a new jumper or anything like that. All you're going to be doing is relocating 1/2 of a wire that is already present. So pay attention to that detail. So now I'm going to compare the configuration I have in the hoist at the moment with what the schematic says it should be, take my wires off, and reattach them accordingly. I've now attached all my motor leads according to what the diagram says they should be for 220 volt. The next thing I'm going to do is check my work. Again, we have the wiring diagram conveniently taped up within eye range, so you have your hands free to do all your checking and all your work. I'm going to compare what the diagram says it should be to what is actually present in there, and they should be identical at this point. Again, you're going to methodically just work your way from, for example, the bottom upwards, just referencing all the wires you've changed, checking them one at a time, making sure that all the screws are snug, and comparing it to the diagram, and they should be the same once again. And the jumper I mentioned before, again, it turns into a jumper, but it's not newly installed. It was from the terminal point to 4 on this contact block. Now it goes from one terminal point on this terminal strip to another terminal point on this terminal strip. I simply removed 1/2 of it from point 4 on this contact block and reinstalled it on terminal point 7. So now we've checked our work, we know it's accurate. We're ready to reinstall the cover. Get some things out of your way. And what you want to do is make sure your wires are not interfering with the plane of the gasket, because when you reinstall this, you don't want to have any pinch points. And you're going to want to pay attention to this hole in the hoist cover. That's got to line up with this pin on top. So you're ready to swing that up. Again, taking care to not pinch any wires. Lining up that hole with the pin. You've now got your cover in the appropriate place, and you're ready to grab your 4 bolts and tighten it up. Now that we've reinstalled the control cover on our hoist, we're ready to move on to the next area to work on, and that is the trolley box control cover. And all you need for this is a screwdriver, and you're going to remove the 4 screws, one on each of the 4 corners of that cover. Lift your cover off, and then you're ready to get to work. Now that we've removed the trolley box cover, we can reference our wiring diagram, which is still taped to our hoist for convenient reference. Reference the section that we identified earlier based on the information on the wiring diagram. And note that the one thing in this situation that we need to do is relocate one terminal connection. And that terminal connection takes place between terminal point 12 and the opposite end of that wire, which currently terminates behind that terminal strip at another point. So first thing we need to do is to swing this terminal strip out of the way to make our work a little easier. And in order to do that, you only need to completely remove the left screw, loosen the right screw, ever so slightly swing the terminal strip out of the way, just so you can easily access the point underneath where you need to remove the wire. And I can reference my wiring diagram and see that that point is point 4. Remove that connection. And while referencing the wiring diagram, I can see where I need to relocate that point, and I can see that that is on terminal strip point 10. So now I will take this end and reattach it where the diagram says I should. And now I've reattached that one end of that one wire to create a jumper as the wiring diagram indicates it. Again, when the wiring diagram indicates that there is a jumper, that does not mean you need to install a new jumper between 2 points or reinstall one that you think you may have taken out. That's not the case. All that's saying is that you're removing 1/2 of an existing wire, one termination point, and terminating it in a new point to create a jumper between 2 points on the terminal strip. Now that we've completed that step, we're just going to quickly double check that one connection between points 12 and 10 on that terminal strip. We've checked that I have completed that step successfully, so we're just going to undo the steps that we took to get here. Loosen the one screw to allow us to pivot the terminal strip back into place. Now take the one screw that we actually removed fully, reinstall that. And now we're ready to take the trolley box cover that we removed and reinstall it, while making sure the gasket is lined up in the proper places. Line it up over the top, while taking care to not pinch any wires around the edges. Make sure that you have a clear border around all the edges because you don't want to cause any damage to anything. And now retrieve your 4 screws, reinstall them, and upon completing that, you'll be ready to move on to the next area. We're now ready to get to work on the third area on our SNER, SMR voltage change from 110 to 220 volt. The first thing we need to do is to remove the cover on the trolley motor connections, which is held on by 4 screws, 3 of which I've already removed. And what we would recommend at this point, a little trick to make your life easier, is simply loosen the 4th screw, rotate the panel out of the way, and retighten that very same screw. That way you secure the lid in place. You have one less screw to keep track of. You eliminate the possibility of that panel lid from falling if you happen to be working at a height high up in the air in your facility. The next thing you want to be sure is that you have your wiring diagram handy. Masking tape secures it to the hoist. That way you have it in a convenient location for your reference. And you're going to be working with the terminal points located inside this box. You're going to take a comparison between the configuration that's currently inside the box, compare it to the information that you identified on your wiring diagram earlier, and take note of what changes need to be made. Now, a quick rule of thumb is that the colored terminal points don't need to be changed. The wires you want to concern yourself with are the wires that are identified by the pieces of white tape with labels on them. And because of how similarly they're labeled, what we would recommend at this point is to detach all the terminations for every one of those wires, just to eliminate the possibility of mixing them up and confusion when going back and forth between 2 different diagrams. So simply remove all the letter labeled wires, take a look at the configuration you need to arrive at, and then reattach them accordingly. So now I'm going to remove them, and next we're going to look at the wiring diagram and reattach them the way they need to be. Now that we're done reattaching our wires at their new termination points, the first thing you want to do is check your work. Again, you have your wiring diagram handy. So with quick reference between your wiring diagram and your box on your trolley motor connections, just take a look at each terminal point, 1 through 5 methodically left to right. Just make sure you have the proper wires connected at the proper points. Once you've determined that you do have them connected properly, you can undo the steps that you took to get here. So first, loosen that one screw that is holding your panel lid in place. You could swing it back to its original orientation. Snug that screw up. Take the other 3 screws that you removed, reinstall them, while making sure that around the edges you have not pinched any wires. Make sure your gasket is lined up properly, and 1 screw at a time, reinstall your cover. You've now completed all the work required to successfully change your voltage on your SMR SNER trolley hoist from 110 to 220 volt. The final step you need to conduct is to reapply power, your new voltage, to your trolley hoist and verify that it works the way it should. If it operates properly, that means you've done your job right and you're finished. Thanks for watching. Again, my name is Adam Tansky, an engineer in Harrington's Custom Products Group. Thank you.
That concludes another episode of Lessons on Lifting. Thank you for joining the revolution.